Started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session of Ready for Pre-K. My name is Drew, and I'm the manager of Birth to 5 programming here at DCPS. And I'm so thrilled that you are here with us this evening. We have a really special presentation tonight on toilet learning that's going to be presented by the Mary Center Parents as Teachers program. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we officially get started, there are just a couple of housekeeping items that I like to go over at the beginning for the group. We're using Zoom to host tonight's session. And so throughout the session, we invite you to enter your questions and comments into the Q&A, but you're also encouraged and welcome to unmute and ask your questions live if you feel confident. We love hearing your voices. Because these sessions are recorded and we do post them to the DCPS YouTube channel afterwards, for right now, we do have the participants' camera function turned off just so that we don't catch any embarrassing mishaps. So if your camera happens to pop on, we will probably turn that off, but do feel free to unmute yourself at any time to chime in. And if you need any technical support, please enter that into the chat during the session. And then we also are offering simultaneous interpretation in Spanish this evening. So I'm going to do a quick pause for an announcement for those who would like to use the interpretation services. Florence, do you mind to read these for us and give folks who are interested in their service just a moment to log on?
Sure. Thank you, Drew. Buenas noches, buenas tardes a nuestras familias que hablan español. Sí tenemos interpretación en español para esta sesión. Si están usando una computadora, tienen que presionar ese icono que está al lado de abajo de la parte inferior de su pantalla. Presionen el icono del globo. Cuando seleccionan el icono del globo, van a presionar el español. Y presionar también donde dice ahí Mute Original Audio en inglés. Eso va a silenciar el audio original para silenciar todos los demás idiomas. Y si usted está usando un tablet como un dispositivo móvil, tableta, iPad, presione esos 3 puntitos que dicen More o más. Presionen ahí donde dice Language Interpretation. Interpretación del lenguaje y presionen en español y también como en la computadora Mute Original Audio para silenciar el audio original y eso silencia todos los demás idiomas. Gracias por estar aquí.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Florence. And we have Evelyn on, who is our interpreter for this evening. So Evelyn, thank you so much for being here. And we also to remind any of our participants, if you would like to write your question in Spanish in the chat, you can absolutely do so. And Florence can read that from the chat and cue us. So please enter any questions or comments that you have throughout the session. We also like to start all of our Ready for Pre-K sessions off with just some general community agreements for our time together. We are really committed to making sure that this is a forum, that this forum is the place where everyone feels safe and welcome and respected. And we're all at different places on our learning journey. So we ask that you be kind, that you be patient, and that you be open to the experience. And with that, I'm so excited to introduce tonight's facilitators. Tonight we have Alex and Nancy who are joining us from the Mary Center Parents as Teachers program. And we are so excited to have you all joining us because toilet learning is a topic that we get a lot of requests about from parents and caregivers and educators of young children. And so we are grateful for you sharing your approach and your expertise with us this evening. And with that, Alex, you can go ahead and share your screen and I'll let you guys take it from here. There we go. Looks good.
Okay, I've got the share screen going. I've unmuted myself. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here with you this evening to talk about toilet learning. What a topic. I know There are questions that have already been submitted, and we will have questions at the end. As a reminder, as Drew has said, right, go ahead, use that chat. And feel free to come off mute and ask your questions at any point, as long as you reserve, a little grace for me if I don't have the answer, because I do not have all the answers. But also, right, if it's going to come up, in the next slide or a little later, I might just push it on down the line. Okay, cool. So with that in mind, again, I am Alex Harvey. I am the senior manager at Mary Center. I manage our Parents as Teachers home visiting program, as well as the Child Find program. And I'll tell you a bit more about both of those at the end of our time together. And I also co-chair Mary Center's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Awareness Committee, or DEI committee. And I feel that's important to share, as I want folks to know, right, when I'm facilitating on any topic, right, be it toilet learning or parenting in general, it really is coming from a place centering families' experiences and the fact that we are parenting, we're trying to teach our children critical skills in a greater context. So again, from every topic, from coming out of diapers to activities to boost development, that's really important to keep in mind. So I just want you all to know. I also have with me a team member, Nancy Vo. She's one of our family support workers and graciously volunteered to help me with the presentation. And so some of the beauty and the content, you can credit to her as well. And again, Nancy is one of our family support workers who implements Parents as Teachers with us. So should you feel, the spirit of enrollment touch you by the end of our time together, Nancy's going to be someone who you very potentially will be working with. And I just want to start with some reflective questions to you all and your experiences. Those of you who are parenting or getting ready to parent, getting ready to transition into from diapers. What kind of expectations do you all already have around toilet learning? And you can reflect on that silently. If anyone would like to answer out loud or in the chat, please feel free. What are your expectations around toilet learning?
Hi, I'm Cervantes Thomas. I'm a parent at Staten Elementary. Well, I have high expectations. I really do, but it's not. Like I have twins who are currently potty training right now. They're 3 years old. My daughter, she does rather well in school. But my son, I feel like he's not really ready. Like I do have, like my expectations are high for them because I'm ready for them to, start their journey where they've already started their journey since school started. But I just feel like my son is not really ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Cervantes. Maybe someone thinks otherwise.
Absolutely. I was going to say, don't ever be shy about us hearing all of your kiddos in the background. Most of us have young children at home or puppies or animals with us. So it brings us comfort to hear them.
Yes, speaking of, that was a special shout out. I definitely have a puppy in my lap. Yes, y'all, life does not stop and pause just because we're coming together for an hour this evening. So please do not apologize for your children being children. Okay. And thank you again, Cervantes, for sharing that. So we've got twins, maybe in different places and high expectations. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. That's my youngest daughter with all the chaos, who just turned 2 on Sunday.
Oh, fun.
But
Happy birthday.
I know, because she's been really unruly right now, but it's okay. Stop hitting your brother. I swear they waited until I got on the phone. But like I feel like even though with the help, because I can like Taylor, who is the girl twin, like she, she we put, like underwear on her and stuff like that at school and try to at least put like a pull up on her when it's time for her to sleep, so that way she doesn't have any accidents while sleeping. And Tyler, who is the boy twin, he'll be dry all day, but he's not really. I mean, like I feel like he's ready to wear underwear, but he doesn't really want to. He'd rather, keep the pull up on, even though I know he will stay dry the entire day. I know he'll stay dry the entire day. But I just feel like even though they're 3, I feel like they're not really ready. I feel like this meeting is very important because even though I have older children, every child is different when it comes to toilet training.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else to response to any of these questions, your expectations, maybe if anyone has any wants to share about how this transition has been handled in your family previously.
I can definitely share that we typically get a lot of questions from parents who are starting to think about pre-K or whose students have just started pre-K, who are feeling very anxious and a lot of pressure about toileting expectations. And just to dispel one common myth about DCPS right off the bat is that your children do not need to be toilet trained in order to start pre-K at DCPS. And so if that's something that is giving you a lot of anxiety that they're not going to be potty trained in time to start school, you can go ahead and relax about that.
Thank you, Drew. Phew. I hope that's a relief to some of y'all. But so moving on, right? Here's what we're going to go through. We're going to talk, about some of those pressures just quickly. We'll start with the difference between why we say toilet learning versus the traditional potty training, not without any judgments toward either phrase. We'll talk about some skills. We'll talk about readiness, when to start. We're going to break it down into a 3-step process. We'll talk some tips, and then I'm going to make a pitch for those 2 other programs I mentioned. So training and learning, right? We traditionally, I think I really only grew up with the phrase potty training, and only recently came into knowing toilet learning. And they're working towards the same goal, right? So there's no shame, no harm in saying potty training. But what I want to emphasize here is the perspective and the difference between maybe an independent system that is toilet learning, right? Where when we think of learning, that is something that happens at the individual level. That's something you want your child to do, your children to do. And then you have training, right? Which really requires hands-on coaching. And there's a bit of an interdependence there. Again, nothing wrong with that. There are cultural practices that lend to training and that lend to, having a child be dependent on you all as parents or caregivers to get them to the toilet. And when you think of learning, right, we kind of have more grace with that. Oh, they're still learning. Oh, they're still learning, right? Versus that coach train mentality of really getting to the results quickly. So that's just a little bit about why I'm calling it here toilet learning, but we are talking about the same thing. So let's talk some pressures, right? Drew just mentioned, that there are real pressures from schools and from educational institutions or even childcare providers. So while DCPS does not require folks or your kids to be potty trained before entry, we know that there are other other providers, right? They formal or informal that do require that. We have our own expectations that add pressure to potty training, right? Or toilet learning. We are ready for our children to be out of diapers, right? It's convenient. We feel, it's time, whatever that time is for you. There might be some comparison, right? So-and-so's kid is out of diapers, they're the same age. And family and friends, well-intentioned, well-meaning, but they make a comment and it's interpreted or it feels like pressure. And that's also okay. These things exist. But what we are going to talk about really is how to address the pressure. Because just like Cervantes said earlier, every child is different. And if we take the pressure we are experiencing and apply that across the board, then we're not really allowing for those differences. Children will learn at different paces. And that's going to be okay too. So when we think of the skills required to start toilet learning, if you all only had 5 things to say, if you had to break it down into 5 steps, what would be your first step? What was the first thing you would say is required to learn toilet learning? How to use the restroom? What's step number 1?
I love it. No wrong answers, people. Don't
Yes.
be shy. Feel
No
free to
wrong
unmute,
answers at all.
drop it in the chat.
You just get 5 sentences to break it down. What's number 1? I'm sorry, and I can't see the chat if anyone's putting their first step there.
Of course, I'm going to take a stab at it. And I'd love to hear what other people are saying. Oh, I see somebody put in knowing when to go, listening to their body. Yeah, feeling like you have to go. So maybe that awareness.
Okay, that's a very good one. Anyone else? Does anyone have a different one? Well, that's a great place to start, right? And as you'll see, we're talking about toilet learning, and toilet learning is also the outcome. That's also what we want. When we say toilet learning, potty trained, we are meaning our children can go to the restroom independently. But the first step, as that brave soul just mentioned, right, is not about getting to the restroom. It's not about the act of going to the restroom. It is very much, right, understanding your body cues. And so one way we can think of this first section are pre-potty skills. Right? These are the things, this is our stepping stool, if you will, into readiness, right? Is your child aware of their body signals? That's right. And so that's our basic readiness cue. Can you tell that they can tell something is up, right? They feel it. You see them start to wiggle. You see them start to, clench. And then not only are they feeling it, but can they interpret that, right? Can they connect that feeling with the consequence, right? With, oh, I'm about to go to the restroom. So we need that. Next, Can they undress easily? That's a really important skill that's required to get to where we want them to be. Can they pull their pants down? Can they unbutton? Can they unsnap? Can they unzip, right? Control. Have they recognized the signals, link that to what's happening next? Can they get their pants down or get the overalls off? And then can they wait until that's done? And then can they release once it is done? Right, those are important cues to know ahead of time. And can they sit comfortably on the toilet? If they can't sit comfortably, that's going to create, right, a barrier to encouraging this behavior over and over again. And then can they wash their hands? That's a really important piece too. Right? You love them, they love you, they go to the restroom, they want to celebrate with you, put their hands all over you. Can they wash their hands? Do they have access to the sink? Is there soap, right? Is that a part of the routine?
I love that, Alex. On that note, Cervantes had put in the chat learning a routine. So obviously, yes, that's absolutely a key part of this. And I had a follow-up question. One of the participants had entered into the registration form. Is it better to teach children using like a child-sized potty chair, or maybe a potty seat that goes onto like an adult toilet? And so when you mentioned sitting comfortably, do you have any thoughts about if there's one approach that's more effective than another, or how to determine what might be right for your child?
I don't have, an opinion on what is more effective between the choices, right? But what is going to be most effective is something that works for your children. And so if, the booster seat that sits on top of the toilet, if that works and it's functional for your family, then that will be how they learn, right? And so there might be some experimentation, but if it's new, it's new, right? And so it's not a matter of, it's not of, oh, well, we got to go from the tiny toilet seat on the side to then stepping up to a full-size toilet. For some families and for a lot of families, that is the progression. But whether it's better or not, I think just like Cervantes said again, right, it's going to be that routine and that it's comfortable.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I wanted to see my notes. So just give me a second to transition how I share here. Okay. I think y'all should be looking at the whole shebang, right? Okay, great. So from here, if I can get the transition going. Sorry, y'all, my screen is not advancing. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. So let's talk starting point, right? Let's say everyone, all 5 skills, those pre-potty skills, they're present. We're ready to start learning. Your children are ready to start learning. You all are ready to start, right, supporting and coaching and practicing. You've readied yourself. We'll talk about that. But we're here now. So I'm going to give just 2 options, 2 out of an infinite number of ages for a starting point, right? And if I can get a couple of reactions, thumbs up, you can come off mute for folks who would want to start at 18 months? So if you think 18 months is when we start, that's when we started, that's when I want to start. Give me a reaction. And then I'm going to ask you, how long do you think it'll take? So maybe that can go in the chat. If you're starting toilet learning at 18 months, how long do you think it'll take?
Gosh, how quickly we forget. I'm trying to like do the math in my head with my own children. I'm so interested and curious to hear what other folks have to say.
Yes. So 18 months, that's what, 1.5. How long before? Oh, well, you can see it if you start at 18 months, 4+ years, right? That's the, according to recent studies. If you start at 18 months, most children complete toilet learning over the age of 4 years old.
That's a very long time to be doing toilet learning. I think much longer than most people anticipate. We had a couple of comments in the chat too, that folks were saying they thought maybe 3 to 6 months. Somebody added, I thought it should start at 24 months, but honestly, when they're ready.
Absolutely. The readiness, I'm so glad for that, right? The readiness, much of that is going to happen naturally. And so when, again, whether it's the external pressure, whether it's our own expectations, starting the process before checking in on those signs of readiness can lead folks to starting the learning, the training a bit earlier than what studies say for the shorter amount of time. Because again, 18 months to 4+ years might not be a problem for some people. You may not want it to take that long, right? So then it becomes a challenge. But there's also nothing wrong with the process taking a long time for your children. So for folks who didn't say 18 months, stuck with 30 months, they're about 2.5 here. How long do you think, if you start at 2.5 years old, how long do you think that would take?
Two and a half, that's just about the age somebody guesses a year. Yeah, I'm thinking about 2.5 is right when folks start thinking about pre-K 3. Somebody else that says I'm going to stick with 3 to 6 months. Starting at 2, maybe 1 full year, but not completely potty trained, maybe 2 years.
Okay, it's a good spread. So let's see. 6 months about. So if you start at 30 months, 2.5, most of those children are going to be fully toilet learned, if you will, learned by 36 months, by 3. Because again, there's a lot of natural learning that's taking place during this time. Right? So what else is happening during the season of toilet learning? Those so-called terrible twos, right? Where that's all about independence. That is all about doing it themselves. That's about wanting to be like the adults around them, right? And so starting that, whether we're starting it before they're fully ready or under pressure, starts to butt up against that natural developmental stage. And everyone's favorite word, it was certainly my favorite word, my parents will tell you, no. You want me to go to the rest? No, not doing it. If you want me to do it and I want to be independent, I'm not doing it. And that is a very natural part of development, but we don't want to butt up against it during this also very natural, very important, very, very much a thing we all want and need. All right, so we've got an earlier start date that takes a much longer process. But if we hold out a bit for the majority of children, it's going to be a shorter, quicker, quicker process to get fully toilet trained. So
That's
our-
really interesting. I think, I hope for everybody else on the call too, I find these numbers so reassuring. I don't know about for anybody else, but I definitely started getting messaging, from family members, or especially older family members who are like, oh, my children were all potty trained by the age of 2, or, oh, she's not potty trained yet, she's going to be 2, and feeling like maybe she was behind. But seeing this progression of when children are actually ready and how long it takes, I think is really realistic and reassuring, and certainly much more in line with what I've seen as a toddler teacher in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. When we think back on those readiness steps, those 5 pre-potty skills, how difficult is that to do at 1.5? Right? Are our expectations for the natural developmental processes for 1.5-year-old aligning with the skills that they need to start this process? Right, and we'll talk in the preparation. It's a lot. There's really not much about our children's learning that happens without you all as parents and caregivers being ready to teach and coach and support, right? And toilet learning is no different. And so if we are trying to get a kid to do something that they're not yet ready for, research tells us there's a very real consequence to that child's self-esteem, right? To their confidence in themselves. We know that body image starts real young. And so while it may look different, they express it differently, or not at all, not verbally at all, right? Those feelings can start really young. And so, I'm curious. This is not science, do not quote me. I am curious about when we start earlier, and that's taking a longer process, how much of that is because unknowingly we're having to repair confidence in our children, right? Or self-esteem, and teach this new skill. We don't know that because we don't really talk about how potty training impacts self-esteem. So that's something that I definitely learned in this line of work and keep in mind. Okay, so when we break it down into 3 steps, a lot of alerts. I hope you all aren't seeing all of the alerts that I have going on over here. If we can break down toilet learning into 3 steps. We talked about readiness, and we'll get into some more steps there as well, those pre-potty skills. We need to talk about preparation. That's your work. That's you preparing yourself for the running back and forth, for setting up the routine, for managing expectations, managing others' expectations, so that you can focus on that child in front of you. And like Cervantes said, every child is going to be different. So whether you are working with multiples that are yours, multiples that you're caring for, just one, it all might look a little different. And then that last step is the transition itself. Right, so readiness. And I know there were a couple of questions about this earlier, and we talked about those pre-potty skills, but there are going to be some additional clues and cues for individual readiness, right? Once they've gotten those 5 pre-potty skills down, there are going to be some additional things to look out for. Right? And some of them were mentioned earlier, right? Do they stay dry during the day for about 2 hours at a time, or dry during a nap? That's a sign of readiness. Are they telling you when they're wet and or when they're dry? Are they expressing that to you? There might be some discomfort there. That's a good cue to latch onto to start helping them prevent being wet. Right? Are they having regular bowel movements? It's a lot easier to start creating that routine when they've got a routine, right? So you can kind of attach to that. Right? Are they making sounds or faces when they have a bowel movement? Right? And they're still in diapers, and this is a cue, and it kind of helps with that regularity because it helps you as parents and caregivers notice, okay, there's something, again, we can kind of cue into, we can dial into here to start talking transition. Do they care about a clean diaper? Also a good indicator. And if they're showing interest in imitating adults, they want to do what the big kids do. They want to do what the adults do. This is a thing that adults do. Are there any other signs or cues that you all have picked up on with your children or the children you work with? Any other signs of readiness you've seen or heard?
We have some appreciation for these readiness skills in the chat. Especially, yes, Cervantes mentions, thank you so much for this. This will definitely help me with my twins and my youngest daughter. I love that. I think drawing on experience formally teaching toddler classrooms, a lot of times children would start to pretend to make their stuffed animals or their baby dolls go to the potty, interest in pretending to change their diapers or pretending to put them on, a miniature potty. So definitely, like you said, showing interest in intimidating adults. And we've got a comment in the chat that says, my son removes his pull-up once he's soiled, which I took as a sign of readiness. So
Yes.
really.
That's a great one.
I kind of want to, Alex, if I can just jump in,
Please.
because I did kind of want to tie this. There have been, there was a question or a comment in the chat earlier, and also a question that was submitted by a participant around those nonverbal cues, right? Like, let's think about our children who may not be verbal for a variety of reasons, right? Either developmentally or age-wise, whatever it might be, so what are those signs that that let us know even from nonverbal children? And so when I think about like that feeling of you don't like being dirty, right? Those could be those nonverbal cues, right? Even if your children aren't explicitly saying something about it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a really good, feedback to make sure that the vocabulary even here is less dependent on verbalizing that, right? So that second point could very well be however they let you know that they're wet is a sign of readiness, right?
Yeah,
thanks for that. Right, and so we've got some signs. So let's talk prep. Let's talk prep work. What do you all need to do? Because they're most likely not getting to the toilet 100%, especially not at the beginning of learning. What do we mean prepare? Here's some more things. Again, this is very much in your wheelhouse, right? The vocabulary, whether that's signs, however you all communicate, how to make that consistent. It's less about what words you use or what signs you use, and more about choosing them and then being consistent with them. And so again, because they're learning. And how do we all learn? By repetition. And so if we're constantly switching up the words that we use or how we talk about or express going to the restroom, it makes it hard for, our tiny learner to follow us. And then we might be asking, well, why didn't you let me know you needed to go to the toilet? It's like, well, you've been calling it the poo-poo room for the past 3 months before they were ready to actually start using it. So now we've got to realign. That's not an insurmountable thing, but it is certainly an important step in the prep work to help. Right? So we can also model, right? We can model going to the restroom. We can be expressive about going to the restroom, but there's much, if not most, of what your children learn and how they act is going to come from what they see. Right? We can read about
También
going to the
podemos
restroom.
leer.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, hold on. I think we had somebody unmute. Please feel free to go ahead and ask your question. Oh, and it looks like there might be some challenges with the interpretation. So give me just a second and we'll try to
Sure, no problem.
get that set up. So if you lost interpretation function for a minute, hold on. We're trying to fix that. All right, Alex, I think you can continue.
Okay. Welcome back. Okay. So we're just on that third point. We can read. We can read about going to the restroom, introduce them to other children who are learning. Doesn't need to be the first time they see or experience the process. Doesn't need to be the first time when you're ready to start their learning. And we can read books about it. We can have that equipment, with that question that came up earlier about having a separate little mini potty or the seat on top of the seat. Either whichever you find works for you and makes sense for you. It may not be feasible for everyone to have the small potty next to the big one for various reasons. It's just important that you have what you're going to use. It's important to practice. We'll talk about that in a tip, but someone mentioned having, I think maybe a 2.5-year-old who will sit on the toilet but isn't quite using it yet. That's okay. That's also part of the process. It's a matter of fact, it is a tip. You can consider it practice, getting used to it. You can talk about going to the restroom. Talk about not being in diapers. Talk about being wet versus being dry. And then the last point here is hygiene, right? Again, that's going to be that hand washing. That's going to be, making sure that everything is set up for them to use in a way that makes sense for a little tiny human. But those are the main prep steps as the adults who are getting ready to engage in toilet learning. Does anyone else have any experiences or things to add for others here? How have you been preparing? Or how did you prepare?
leave a comment in the chat that someone's tried using a smaller potty in the bathroom with me, but they still won't use it at all. And it's hard. And just like we said, with that trial and error, trying different types of seats and equipment and everything.
Right, so you've got the equipment. Sounds like there's some practicing. I'm sure there's some talking going on there. A lot of steps. Well, hang in there, right? We know learning is a process. They will get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see some singing the potty song, trying to give encouragement that way. I know there's lots of potty books too.
Yeah. Well, good. They will get there. Something will click. And if you find, you know what, maybe we need to go back and practice some of the pre-potty skills, that's also okay too. There's nothing about learning, certainly not toilet learning, that is linear, as we will talk about, right? It doesn't just, they do it once and then you never go back, as you all know. It doesn't happen that way. So if we need to go back and practice something else, we'll go back and practice something else. And then you get to see how quickly that boosts, right? How quickly you surpass the challenge area.
Absolutely. Somebody had mentioned in the chat earlier that around this age 2, oftentimes children are enjoying dress up play and pretend play, and that, you know, pretending to take clothes on and off as part of a dress up game is also a great way to support some of these pre-potty skills of being able to take your own clothes on and off as well.
It's such a great insight there. How awesome is it for kids? Play is learning. Great. All right, and so the last step of our 3-step process is the transition itself. It is going from being totally dependent on diapers, 100% dependent on diapers, to using the toilet more. Right? And you know that you're ready to even start the transition itself, because your child will tell you in whatever way they communicate with you that they're ready. You've done the prep work. They've been doing the readiness. And now you all get to have, you get to align everything that's been happening. Sorry. You get to align everything that's been happening to make it into this transition.
I love one of our participants in the chat mentioned that they have been using a potty training watch, which has been a great help. And so I haven't heard of that before. So I'm sure other parents on here would be definitely interested in hearing more if you want to share what that is. It sounds great.
Yes, please.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, so I found it on Amazon. I'm not sure who recommended it to me, but Amazon has it. And basically it's a watch that he can wear and it'll go off. You can set the different time increments, whether it's 30 minutes, 1 hour, or an hour and a half. And it'll play there's a little tune that it plays just to kind of remind my son, like, okay, it's time to go sit on the pot, just so he can kind of get used to going, even if he doesn't necessarily go. So try to just put him on the pot and just see what happens. But it kind of just helps him get more familiar with, it's time to go to the pot. So, but yeah, Amazon has them and they're great.
That sounds like a great tool. Right. Well, that's a really great segue into this first tip, right? A routine, setting up a routine, whether that is just a time check, and I'm going to combine you checking in with them at those regular increments. Do you need to go to the restroom, right? Feeling, you still dry? Again, that letting them just sit is helpful to the process. That is okay. Managing our own expectations and feelings, even when it's super inconvenient to have an accident somewhere where you don't have a change of clothes, the importance of staying calm and reassuring them, as I'm sure you all do. Accidents happen, right? That is very much a boost in this process. Expect them to explore, right? Y'all are talking about toilets all the time. You go over to someone's house, they want to see their toilet. They want to see their restroom. That's okay. That's normal. My goddaughter, when she started toilet learning, every time she came over, as the first thing, can I see your bathroom? That's the first thing out of her mouth. Not hi, not hello. She calls me chickpea, not hi chickpea. Can I see your bathroom? She didn't have to go. Right. Let them know you're proud. You want to listen to them. Dial into that communication. Right. And then easy clothing. That's, you can set up the steps for the pre-potty skills by making sure their clothes are easy for them to take off when they need to. And then remembering daytime dry and daytime control is going to happen first. That's going to be easier for them to control. And then after a while, and I think someone mentioned this before, right? Going dry and having underwear on during the day, and then maybe an overnight during the night while they're sleeping. That's a natural, again, progression of toilet learning. And then before you know it, your kid's gonna be out of diapers, right? And so this here is just a quick handout. I will make sure everyone has a copy of this. I'll either drop it in the chat or I'll send it to Drew to send out to you all. But again, it's just kind of, a condensed version of this PowerPoint, connecting you all as parents and caregivers, how you manage your feelings, your expectations, and the positive impact that will have on your children's toilet learning. And then, I don't know what kind of potty songs folks have, but there are plenty out there. So here is just a quick little.
I'm a big kid sitting on the potty. It's potty time.
Right, and everyone will be singing that soon enough. Happy again to send this link as well. It's just a quick one, but in looking for this, I discovered so many. Some are very long, some, like the one I chose, are very short. So I know several of you mentioned having potty songs. For those of you maybe still looking for one, you've got a good selection out there. But that's that for toilet learning. So I just want to, let me stop sharing and check in on questions or comments.
Absolutely. Alex, thank you so much. Yeah, and this is your time, folks. So if there are things that you have questions about or ideas, I love that some folks were sharing tips that they've used themselves in the chat. Please share. You're also a great resource for one another as well.
Awesome. I'm going back through. I'm looking at these other great tips that were in the chat.
For sure. I'm going to share my screen just to put up a couple of other resources as well. While I do that, Florence, I know that there were a couple of questions that folks had submitted during registration. Do you mind to double check and see if there are any of those that we feel like didn't get answered during the session? And then just to remind the group too that we will send out a newsletter in just a couple of weeks. And so we'll include all of the links that were shared tonight and any additional information with you. So don't feel like you have to rush and jot everything down. And it looks like we've got a question in the chat for you too. Alex, are you able to see the chat now?
I am,
Great.
but this one I think is more of a relief. And so, you know, they say, you know, the 2.5-year-old has shown none of the signs of readiness yet, I'll add. So it's not an issue to start pre-K, correct?
Not an issue.
And so I hope that helps to relieve some of that anxiety. And do know the signs of readiness, again, for the majority of children will happen. We can do some prep work to support that as well, but it'll happen. And if not, there are resources available to boost and support that as well, because that is okay. Some children just really will need support.
Absolutely. And when you think about, you know, the children coming into pre-K 3, some of them are, you know, on the earlier end or on the later end as far as birthdays goes. So some of our kids who start pre-K 3 have literally just turned 3 like that month, you know, and so are maybe just, you know, starting this process as well. And for others, the process might be taking longer. And so, yeah, just to reassure all of you, our pre-K teachers at DCPS are very prepared to help you in this journey. And so the most important thing is communication. And so letting your child's teacher know kind of where you're at in the process and what your approach has been at home, so that they can offer a similar approach at school and use the same vocabulary that you're using for, you know, any sort of toilet words or for private parts as well, so that they can be on the same page with what your child's needs are. So just communicating with them, and they will help you for sure. They're very experienced with this.
Excellent. Lots of relief there for that.
And thank you so much, Alex, because I'm looking over the questions again, and I think pretty much everything was covered in one way or another, especially going through the steps so thoroughly around readiness and tips.
Excellent.
Absolutely. And before I forget, I know that we talked about sharing additional resources, but if anybody on the call does have concerns about their child's growth or development, or just has some questions and needs some follow-up resources, I'll certainly let Alex give a plug for the program that she works with and for Mary Center, but also just to keep in mind that Strong Start is always an option that you can contact, and we've got the contact information here. It'll also be in the newsletter. You can contact Early Stages if your child is over 3 years old, and then your child's pediatrician as well. And so certainly if you're having any you know, uneasiness or questions or concerns, definitely reach out to any of these folks as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And last thing from me, y'all, like I mentioned earlier, thank you, Florence. There's a link for Mary Center's family support programs. I manage one of them, specifically the Parents as Teachers program. It's a home visiting program where our trained family support workers meet with families virtually or in person in an environment that is most comfortable for the family, to focus on child development and parenting behaviors. And so a lot of what we did today, less us talking, more you talking, but focusing on linking how you all positively influence the development of your children, of your littles. And so we do that again through our visits, take place once or twice a month. They're 45 minutes to an hour long. We bring activities. We do developmental screening as well. We make community connections, and so connecting you and your family to any other resources that you're interested in. Doesn't have to be a need, can just be a want. And we can do that to the extent that you want. And then we have monthly group connections similar to this fantastic event, where we introduce our enrolled families to other enrolled families, and sometimes just eligible families, right, to get a sense of our PAT community. And with the goal of making sure that children are ready for school. We serve families with children under age 5 and got to live in the district. And that's that. So I'll put my email in the chat here, and then I will again make sure that there's more information maybe in that newsletter, so we can stay in touch.
Definitely, definitely. And as we close out tonight's session, I do just want to give everybody on the call an opportunity to provide us with some feedback. So you'll see on the screen, there's a QR code that you can scan, and there's just a quick survey about your experience tonight, that we would really appreciate your input. Your input and your ideas inform the content of the sessions. It informs the topics that we cover, and so definitely give us your feedback on that. And then just for taking the time to fill out the short survey, you're entered to win a drawing for a bundle of children's books. And so what's better than taking 30 seconds to fill out the survey, and then you get a great bundle of children's books sent to you in the mail. And for this one, you might even get some books that have to do with toilet learning. So I'm sure that would be beneficial to everyone. And with that, I think we'll call it a night. Thanks everybody so much for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you so much, Alex, for presenting tonight. This was really, really helpful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
everyone.
night.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for moderating, Florence.